Problem number 30. The average gas prices for 30 gas stations in Florida for Thanksgiving weekend in 2014 was $2.09 with a standard deviation of 21 cents. If you keep reading, it goes on to give you the average gas prices in 2015. It also says mean and standard deviation. So this appears to be a problem where we have two samples and the question is going to be regarding means. Let's keep reading. At the 1% significance level, okay, there's our alpha. That means this is probably going to be a hypothesis test. Was the average gas price in Florida for Thanksgiving weekend in 2014 less than in 2015? Yep. So this is going to be a hypothesis test for two means. So let's go ahead and write the information down. So we have two different years, 2014 and 2015. So let's see. The average gas prices for 30 gas stations, that's going to be the sample size for 2014. So that's N sub 1. So N sub 1 is 30. Was 209. That's the average. So that's X bar sub 1 is $2.09 with a standard deviation of 21 cents. That's the sample standard deviation. We know that because it never tells us that it's the population standard deviation, so it must be the sample. Also, it's talking about the 30 gas stations. That's the sample size. This standard deviation comes from the 30 gas stations. Therefore, it must be the sample standard deviation. So they're giving us the sample standard deviation. They're not giving us the population standard deviation, so that means we're going to use T in StatCrunch. Remember, if they give you the population standard deviation, it has to be clearly stated. You would use Z. Otherwise, you use T in these problems regarding means. Now we have the average gas prices for 26 gas stations. That'll be N sub 2. That's 26. And then we have 236. That'll be X bar sub 2. That's our other sample mean, $2.36. And then a standard deviation for 2015 was 49 cents. Looks like we have a higher average in 2015 based off the sample data and a higher standard deviation as well. At the 1% significance level, was the average gas price in Florida for Thanksgiving weekend in 2014 less than in 2015? Okay, so the very first step is to set up the null and alternate hypotheses. So the null hypothesis is HO and the alternate or alternative hypothesis is H1. So H sub 0 is always mu1 equals mu2. Whenever it's two means, it's always mu1 equals mu2. In this case, it says less than, so we just change this to less than for H1. Steps 2 and 3 come entirely from StatCrunch. So we're going to use T in StatCrunch. So let's go to StatCrunch, and we go to Stat, T-stats, and we have two samples in this problem, and it's with summary because we have a summary of the data. So stat, T-stats, two sample with summary. We plug everything in, so 2.09 is the sample mean. The sample standard deviation is 0.21, and the sample size is 30. In 2015, the sample mean was $2.36. Standard deviation was 49 pennies, and the sample size was 26. You want to make sure you do not check pool variances. Leave this at 0, and then just change this to less than. So everything looks good. Let's see, 209, 0.21, 30. 236, 0.49, 26. Everything looks all right. All right, going to go ahead and click compute. And then step 2 is always the test statistic. That's our T. So in this case, T is equal to negative 2.61. That's our test statistic. And then our p-value in this case is 0.0068. I just circled it because I scratched it out, so I wanted to make sure T is equal to this, right? That's our test statistic. Step 4, we have to make a decision. We either reject or fail to reject the null hypothesis. In this case, whenever the p-value is smaller than alpha, we reject. And so in this case, we will reject, right? Because our p-value is less than or equal to alpha, so we're going to reject the null hypothesis. We'll reject H sub 0. And then step 5 is the interpretation. we always start our interpretations by mentioning the level of significance. In this case, it's 1%, so at the 1% level of significance, and when we reject h sub 0, then we do have enough evidence to support h1. So if we reject h sub 0, there is sufficient evidence. So there is, I'll just put suff, evidence to support h1. So I'll just say to claim that. Then you can just go to the last sentence, that the average gas price in Florida for Thanksgiving weekend in 2014 was less than in 2015. So that I have to reword it slightly, the average gas price in Florida, I'll abbreviate it FL, for Thanksgiving weekend in 2014 was less than in 2015. Was less than in 2015. And that's it.